welcome to the latest edition of Stargate Universe Sci-Fi Cult Classics franchise documentary. I'm delighted this evening to be joined by the one and only Elyse Levesque to talk about her role as Chloe Armstrong in Stargate Universe. Stargate Universe 2009 to 2011. And I suppose, Chloe, that's Chloe, your character, but Elyse, that's almost like, what, nine years ago now? Does it almost feel like yesterday? Does it almost feel like a decade has gone since you were appearing on Stargate Universe and wasn't one of your first roles?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe. It literally, when you asked me to do this, I went and I rewatched the pilot just to remind myself. And I remember every moment. I remember shooting every scene. I remember the other actors doing their parts. I remember the stuff between the takes, and it feels like it just happened. It's hard to believe that I think it was 2009, like February 2009 when we first shot that pilot. So 11 years ago, almost 12. Wow. It's crazy.
And Elyse, in terms of going back, I suppose 2009 when it came out, but I suppose in terms of shooting and filming, it probably started in 2008. Coming from Vancouver as well, you were probably aware of the Stargate sort of the sci-fi series in terms of its big production, in terms of Stargate SG-1. I suppose Richard Dean Anderson was in it. Jack O'Neill character is legendary as sort of such. Had you applied for previous roles in Stargate Atlantis or Stargate SG-1, or was this your first introduction to it?
It was, yeah. I mean, obviously I was familiar with the show. I knew about it, but I don't think I had auditioned for any of the prior installments, because I think Atlantis probably would have been the one that was filming when I moved to Vancouver. I moved to Vancouver in 2006. So it probably Atlantis would have been the one in production at that point. And I never went in for it prior to SGU. So that was kind of my first introduction to the franchise.
And in terms of the opportunity to play Chloe Armstrong, how did that come along for you? Was it recommended by a casting sort of agent? And was it a rigorous sort of audition process, or were you scouted for the role?
It was a long process. I was not recommended at all. I like a lot of actors, came to just kind of a general casting, first round of auditions in Vancouver. And I remember it was like early November 2008. I distinctly remember the feeling of it going well, though. Like I remember doing, giving my read and leaving and going like, that felt oddly like very successful. And then I think it was like a month later that I heard that they wanted to test me for it. And I had never screen tested for anything before, but I'd heard horror stories from friends of mine who had done it, of like, it's scary, it's awful. You go into this room with like hundreds of people, and like there's a spotlight on you, and like you sign a contract before you go in. And like, if you do a bad job, they'll ask you to leave. Like, so I was very nervous to do it. And I came down to LA, and I did a coaching the night before. The casting director, this is a thing they do often actually when you do a screen test, is you rehearse usually with either the director or the casting director prior to going in, just to make sure that it's like, you're kind of on par, because there's not really feedback given in the moment. You go in, you do your read, and that's it. So the casting director the night before was like, they really want to see you get emotional. And it's really important for them to see your range, that you're able to get there emotionally. So like, long story short, like, you're going to have to cry. So I show up the next day, I get picked up, I arrive at Universal to do this test. And in the hallway, it's so funny because I see Elena Huffman, and I see Louis Ferreira, and I see Brian J. Smith, like all, in our own little corners, like, because they're testing all the characters. And Elena was actually testing for Chloe. Yeah. And so I was there for over 2 hours before I even went in. So by the time I had to go in, I had lost any emotion that I had like prepared.
Yeah.
So I go in and I do it. And I was like, as it was happening, I was like, this is not going well. like in my head, I'm like, this is not, please God, ask me to do it again. But I finished and they were like, great, thank you. And I went outside and you have to wait for a bit. And then another girl went in after me and she came out and she had like mascara running down her face. And I was like, shit, I don't think I'm going to get this. And so anyway, they let us all go after, and I went back to Vancouver and then went home for the holidays. And I think I heard maybe a few days later that like I was their first choice.
Okay.
But then weeks went by and I heard nothing. And then I heard that they'd cast somebody else in the part. And so I kind of just like let it go. And then the beginning of February, I was here in Los Angeles on a road trip with some friends. And I just like on a random Friday afternoon, got a phone call that I'd got the gig and that I needed to get on an airplane and fly up to Vancouver for the table read.
So that was the probably hectic sort of time period for you. And obviously you knew then getting involved in Stargate sort of universe. Did you know yourself it was going to be a 2-season sort of gig that you'd be relocating for maybe 2 to 5, 6, 7 months?
Well, I didn't have to relocate because I already lived in Vancouver. But
okay.
Yeah, I didn't know that. But I mean, I knew. I think we sort of were under the assumption based on the long running, seasons of SG1 in Atlantis that like there was a good possibility that the show could go on for a number of years. Yeah, so I think we were hopeful that it would have been longer than it ended up being. But it was a really magical 2 years. So
yeah, and Elsie, I suppose it was a sort of unique sort of take on sort of Stargate. In terms of previous Stargates, it's all about traveling to sort of different worlds and meeting different sort of folk and generations and different threats to the humankind. Your sort of story was very much a story of being lost in space, trying to, and the human sort of struggle to try and survive in terms of being cast adrift and clinging on to hope maybe of one day finding your soil or loved ones and coming back to sort of thing. So sort of broke down the barriers of what humans go through when they're sort of trapped in infinite sort of hell almost.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. Infinite sort of hell. Yeah. No, it definitely was a story of I think human nature and what humans are capable of when they're put in extreme circumstances, when survival is on the line, with the element of sort of a deeper exploration of the universe. Yeah.
And Elsie, about your character, sort of Chloe Armstrong, she was probably one of the sort of youngest sort of characters in the show, and she was sort of put together with David Blue's sort of character in terms of striking sort of a friendship, and obviously he had romantic sort of feelings for her as well. And was that sort of the idea of to try and listen, these are the two sort of youngest sort of characters in the show, let's have them sort of have that sort of bit of on-screen sort of drama sort of such between them, as they probably depend on each other to relate to each other, because obviously being the sort of two youngest ones, obviously they feel that they're most in touch with each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think those characters were brought in for relatability. They were sort of the most fish out of water people in this situation. Like everybody else on that ship was trained, even though these circumstances were kind of, extreme and, beyond an ideal. Like I think, the military and the scientists were all, trained ultimately to handle the situation that they find themselves in, whereas Chloe and Eli were completely out of their depths. I mean, Eli slightly less so, but Chloe very, very much. I think that kind of allows the audience in some capacity perhaps to imagine themselves in the situation.
And Elsie, in terms of Stargate sort of universe, compared to maybe the sort of Stargate sort of SG1 and Stargate Atlantis, you sort of were bold and daring in some of your choices in terms of some of the content. in terms of some of it was of an adult sort of a nature. There was some sexual sort of scenes that probably we didn't see in the previous sort of Stargate sort of shows. Was that sort of to mirror what goes on between humans in every day-to-day life, and what happens in a spaceship out in space is no different to what happens between the humans on a day-to-day Earth? Obviously, they just wanted to touch on that sort of human aspect in terms of being lost in space.
I mean, I think that's a really accurate analysis. I don't know if that was the intention behind Brad Wright and Robert Cooper taking the show in that direction. I think creatively, they were such fans of Battlestar that they wanted to try their hand at something darker. But I actually really like your take on that. I think that logically makes sense why you would want to go in that direction, because it is fascinating to watch humans, to tell the truth about how humans would be in such an unrealistic situation.
Yeah.
And people would any crisis in the world. I remember friends of mine who lived in Paris when the Bataclan, I think that's what it was called. The terrorist attacks happened, and they're like, the behaviors that came out of all of them as a result of this kind of trauma. Everyone was like having sex with everyone and just like getting drunk and like, fuck it. That's a big part of humanity. And it was really cool to, for the writers and the creators to play in that territory. And as actors, that's thrilling. That's the fun stuff.
And in terms of those sort of scenes for you, in terms of a young actress at the time, is that sort of, do you see it as part of the sort of the job, as part of the story, to portray an accurate sort of portrayal of the character in terms of sexual content and stuff like that? Does it almost feel like that you're portraying what the character's emotions and feelings are at that time?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it certainly is, I think, a lot more of a challenge to do it justice, I think. Interestingly enough, that stuff is honestly less scary for me, the having to do intimacy scenes and that sort of thing, because when you're on set and you see it happening, you would understand. It's so mechanical. You, first of all, you're there in a room with 10 other dudes who are and the director's like, okay, make sure you turn your head just like this, and you put your hand here, and count to 3 and then lie on the bed. And so it's so by the numbers that any kind of actual sexiness is gone. So funny enough, you'd think that would be the scarier thing to do, and that's not saying that there aren't situations in which that stuff is intimidating and challenging, but from my experience, it's usually so not hot that you're like, oh, this isn't so bad. It's harder to I don't know, reveal other parts of humanity, nastiness or competitiveness or grief or, a variety of the other things. That I think is a lot more challenging.
Yeah. And Elsie, in terms of the crossover between certain Stargate shows, you had sort of guest appearances and cameo roles from Michael Shanks and Richard Dean Anderson and Amanda Topping and previous art. Did that almost help you tie in with the sort of Stargate sort of universe, Stargate SG-1 and Stargate Atlantis, that fans of the previous shows could hop on over to your show and sort of follow you, because they almost felt there's the link. It probably needed that sort of link, and it probably needed those guest appearances almost to associate it with a sort of Stargate, because obviously you always need that sort of tie into a franchise, especially which has a hardcore sort of fan base already.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a smart move on the creators to link all the worlds together, and a fun thing for the fans, right? To see their favorite characters kind of in this new version of the story that they love. And it was just really nice for us. It just felt like a handing over of the baton, you know, to have them
Yeah,
on board.
and I suppose, Elsie, one thing that sort of struck me is that you were an all sort of a young sort of a cast, a sort of coming cast, and obviously Robert Carlyle was the sort of big name there, and in that sort of franchise. And no disrespect to any other actors or actresses that appeared on the show, but in terms of when you found out that Robert Carlyle would be on your show and you'd be working, I don't know in terms of how many scenes you had with him, but you're working. With that actor, with that sort of resume, in terms of that sort of body of work, is there a sense of excitement as sort of a young actress to try and delve into his knowledge and try and learn as much as you can from him?
I mean, 100%. He's also just the loveliest man, like so down to earth and kind and present. And I can't say enough wonderful things about Bobby. Funny though, like I had seen some of his work prior to working with him, but I wasn't super familiar with him. Like for me, like Lou Diamond Phillips was a lot more of a presence in my kind of, you know, acting knowledge. But since obviously knowing and working with Bobby, I've watched a lot more of his work, and I'm glad I wasn't aware. Like I'm glad I didn't know who fully know who he was, because I would have been so intimidated.
Yeah.
I would have been so intimidated by him. I mean, not that he would have put me at ease anyway, because that's just who he is. But it was fantastic, and we had the pleasure. I think it was season 2. He directed an episode. And that was pretty special because I really got to see inside his mind and how he thinks as an actor, because I think it translated to how he worked as a director. And as a result, I think he got some really good work out of all of us.
And Elsie, what was it like in terms of the production week on set of Stargate Universe? From the time you came in of a Monday and you got your sort of script, in terms of table reads, in terms of the times for live shoot, were you working a 6-7 day sort of roster per episode, and was it sort of long hours, and was there an awful lot of block shooting or stuff like that?
Well, you know, we were such an ensemble, so with the exception of probably Bobby and Louis Ferreira, most of us came in, you know, 2-3 days a week. Most of the, unless your character featured heavily in an episode, maybe then. Like for the pilot, I remember us all being pretty involved. All like like air part 1 and part 2, we were all, you know, on set pretty much every day for the month that we shot those 2. I think it was like a month that we took to film those. And honestly, like we only did. I think the thing was such a well-oiled machine, and the writers knew who they were writing for so well, that we really only did the table read for part 1 and part 2, maybe part 3, and then I don't think we did any more table reads until we came back to do the second season, which is kind of unusual. Usually when you're on a show, you every Tuesday or whatever, you during the lunch break read the next episode as a cast. So we didn't do that, and I think it's because the writers were most of them had been involved in the previous installments. They knew the world so well, they knew who they were writing for, that they didn't need to, maybe they felt they didn't need to do the table reads. But yeah, they were long weeks, but fantastic weeks. Like we would work often, like 14-hour days, sometimes 16-hour days. Like there's some long ones in there for sure. And, you know, often covered in like dirt and fake blood and all the good things. But we were such a family, like the cast and the crew, that it really was one of the most wonderful work experiences I've ever had, like to this day.
And Elsie, in terms of the Destiny sort of set, in terms of the ship, in terms of what it sort of looked like, that sort of stage and thing, can you sort of describe what that sort of looked like, the set of the Destiny? Was it in a type of an air hangar or an airplane sort of hangar? Was that sort of big, or what did it sort of look like?
I mean,
was it a maze? Could you get lost in it?
The set was amazing. The sets on this thing were incredible. The design, they designed the whole thing. Okay, I'm trying not to get ahead of myself. First of all, it was shot on a soundstage in Burnaby. So they had these massive buildings, and I think there was one kind of main building that was the Destiny. So the ship was sort of laid out in parts. Within that one particular soundstage, and there might have been a couple, like there might have been some control rooms and stuff on another soundstage, but for the most part, it was all in this one area, and it was designed so that walls, etc., could be taken out for shooting, and also so that they didn't really have to do any lighting. They built all the lights and stuff into the structure, so it's great. So much of what you see, like obviously at times the DPs would put, an extra light in here or there, but for the most part, we were being lit by the ship.
Okay.
Which was great and helpful for timing and stuff like that. So it made it a lot, a lot faster and a lot more real.
Elsie, I suppose 2 seasons, and I suppose being involved in sort of Stargate, sort of universe, and I suppose it has a sort of a cult following. Were you sort of taken back? I know you probably knew how big Stargate SG-1 was, but when you're involved in that project, it's work for you. You're going in day in, day out. You're sort of shooting episodes. You have other projects in life. But I suppose when it sort of finishes, then it sort of played back, and then you start to see the response, and do you almost feel like, wow, I've been involved in such a iconic sort of sci-fi sort of franchise here, and just almost see the reaction in terms of being called for conventions, and then seeing all the sort of fan and the hardcore sort of fan base it has all over the world in terms of Stargate, anything involved with that project. Were you sort of taken back by it, the sheer enormity or the sheer scale of that?
I think I still am taken back by it, to be honest. Like the deep love for this show, this franchise, all of these years later, is, I think, really special. And it was so fun to get to, a lot of times you're on a show and you go and you do the thing, and that's kind of it, and it kind of stays there in that experience. But because this has a fandom outside of the show itself, with people doing conventions and other things to express their love for the show, it does feel kind of like you're part of something much larger, and something with I guess like a lineage of some kind, if you will. It's really a really unique experience, and I think an experience that is sort of specific to the world of sci-fi.
Okay. Yeah. And Elsie, in terms of what was I going to say now, in terms of Stargate's universe, and being involved in that sort of project in terms of your career, did it open up many sort of more avenues for you, more opportunities, having that on your resume in terms of your CV going forward? Did you feel a sort of initial sort of surge in opportunities after you finished the show?
I mean, definitely. I yes and no. I think, like, I certainly felt it gave me the opportunity to start working in the States. So that was fantastic, because there was, like, obviously it's a show that people were aware of, and it was an American series. It enabled me to come down here and to start trying my hand at working in the US. But I would say, and there were, I think, some opportunities that came my way directly as a result of working on this show. People, directors who were fans or whatever, offered me parts and things like that. But at the same time, like, I definitely feel like like, it took a minute for me to kind of find my footing down here, and to feel like I'm a part of the industry on this side of the border. That it has taken me a minute.
Yeah. And Elsie, I just realized they're looking at it, Stargate Universe. You finished the season, finished in 2011, 4 years before the Netflix sort of bubble and Amazon Prime and what we have now. And do you think for yourself, in terms of timing, if you had arrived on the stage maybe at the beginning of the emergence of sort of Netflix or something like that, you could have maybe got on that sort of well, that gravy train, and obviously Netflix, it could have led to maybe more sort of seasons, but
Mhm.
it sort of came at a time that people wanted a bit of Stargate, but I suppose it was prominent for its time. But if you probably delayed it another 2 or 3 years, you could have probably got more seasons. That's one thing I suspect.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there was a push even, you know, a few years ago for people like signing a petition to try to get Netflix to pick up the show. I'm sure had we, because you know, so online streaming offers such great opportunities for shows that maybe don't do as well on cable. And you know, we've seen it with a few things. Like Schitt's Creek is such a great example. Like it was, I don't know if you're familiar with Schitt's Creek, but it's a
Yeah.
Canadian series that ran on CBC in Canada, and it did all right. I think it did okay. I'm not sure if they were canceled or not. I don't think that they were, but I do believe like they were probably close to being canceled, and then Netflix picked them up, and then the show became this huge success. I mean, it cleaned at the Emmys this year. So it was just not on the right platform. So it's very possible, had, you know, streaming been an option, that the show would have gotten a few more years.
Yeah, and I suppose that Elsie, before I let you go, sort of one final question before I sort of finish the
No,
interview,
that's
and
it. That's all
this
you
is the
get.
yeah, that's all I get. Yeah, it's waffling now. I'm waffling now. Elsie, in terms of, let's pretend there was a Stargate sort of dictionary or encyclopedia, and they put your character Chloe Armstrong into that encyclopedia, and they left two blank sentences underneath, and they asked you, Elyse Levesque, having played the character Chloe Armstrong, to write those two sentences. What would you like those two sentences to read to describe Chloe?
Oh my gosh, what a question, Jim. What a closer.
Yeah, have to finish strong, Elsie. Have to finish strong.
Gosh, yeah, lost girl desperately seeking self and love in the universe.
That sounds almost like a dating ad or a dating advertisement.
It feels like that feels apropos. Like, yes, that works. Yeah, that makes sense. She's a young girl. She's figuring her shit out. Yeah, something like that.
Elsie, great crack and great camaraderie talking to you today. A pleasure to relive your memories of Chloe Armstrong in Stargate Universe. And no doubt, hopefully, it won't be the last time we'll see you involved in the Stargate sort of world and sci-fi. Pleasure talking to you today. Great stories, great crack, and great sort of humor. And hopefully, you'll bring that spirit with you into 2021.
Thank you, Jem. It was a pleasure.
Cheers. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.